So focusing is an embodied method. So it really includes the body for bringing mindful attention within. It is similar in many ways to mindfulness in the sense that we turn into ourselves with silence and with non-judgmental, with friendliness, with inner attention. But it differs from mindfulness in that we get into a relationship with our problems or issues or concerns. Instead of bypassing them, we actually begin to relate to them in a very compassionate way. So it's a practice that can lead to clarity about issues. It can lead to fresh insights and also to emotional healing. So how do we focus? Well, we begin by first doing something that we don't do a lot in this culture, which is to pause, to actually stop our usual storyline and to drop down into ourselves, to slow down, and then to notice how our body is holding a particular situation or experience in the present moment. And focusing is a way to discover and honor everything we're carrying within, right? So no matter how painful or shameful something is, if we're friendly to it, it's usually a relief to hear it because we were carrying it anyway in our bodies. Now we just have a name for it, and that often gives us a sense of mastery or agency. So let's right now get a taste of what I'm talking about, because focusing, like swimming or skiing, you can't just talk about it. You have to just sort of jump in and experience it. So I'm going to invite you right now to take a moment. You might want to close your eyes or just avert your gaze and take a few relaxing breaths, putting your attention right on your inhalation and your exhalation. Feeling the weight of your body in the chair, your connection to the ground. And then as your breathing becomes a little more even and regular, I invite you to bring attention inside yourself, somewhere between your throat, your chest, and your abdomen. Connect inside. And just notice how you are this morning as we're beginning. And bringing friendly attention inside, you might just ask, how am I? And then instead of answering with what you think you know, wait and let your body tell you. And then see if there's a word or an image that would emerge that would capture how it is to be you this morning. And then check it and see if that's the right way to capture how you are. And please be sure to be friendly to whatever you find, even if you're grumpy or tired or frustrated this morning. Just say hello. I know you're there. And then when you're ready, gently bring yourself back into the room. So I'll share what came from me as I was leading you through that. I had the image of a slightly over-caffeinated horse at the starting gate. I could feel both a little bit anxious and excited. So why learn focusing? How can this benefit you? Well, the first reason is that there is some empirical research that demonstrates that focusing can help accelerate the progress of your therapy. Eugene Gendlin, who was the discoverer or the first one to describe focusing, is actually a philosopher and who became a psychologist, but he was a philosopher at the University of Chicago. And he engaged with Carl Rogers, the famous psychologist, also at Chicago, doing some research together. And it's such groundbreaking, interesting research that I'm going to, in a little while, tell you more about it. But just very succinctly, they found that people who could tune into their direct felt experience were the ones who were more likely to benefit from a year's psychotherapy than those people who couldn't do that naturally. This was those people who just naturally had that ability to do that. And they did better in therapy than those who were intellectualizing or those who were cycling through the same emotions every week, feeling sad or angry, right? So the ones who could stop and say, what is that? Those are the ones who got better. The second reason is that focusing is not, it can be its own kind of therapy, but it also integrates seamlessly with every kind of therapy, whether it's psychoanalytic or cognitive behavioral or humanistic, whether you're working with couples or individuals or in a group. Really, it just adds a dimension of including the body. And Eugene Gendlin liked to say, with 50% of your clients, if you just say to them after they tell you a story, what's that like in here? Take a moment and see what that's like in here. He thinks about 50% of them will go deeper, right? The other 50% will say, what? What are you talking about? And that's fine, then you just go back to whatever you were doing. Another way that focusing can be useful to you is that it teaches your clients how to relate to themselves with compassion, self-compassion, respect, friendliness, welcoming whatever comes. It's just part of the practice of focusing. So people get to cultivate that way of treating themselves. Because in focusing, and this is one of the more challenging aspects of focusing, we have to treat ourselves the way we would treat a beloved child, right? So if a beloved child is sitting in your lap saying, I hate your guts, would you throw them on the floor? No, you would pat them and say, what's wrong, honey? Right? And in a few minutes, you'd probably get a hug. So same thing with the way we treat ourselves. Most of us are more rude to ourselves than we are to any other living being, right? And so focusing actually teaches us how to be kinder to ourselves. And that's a benefit, whatever kind of therapy you're doing. And lastly, focusing helps clients work with feelings without being overwhelmed by them. This is such a big problem as therapists when clients come in and they're flooded and they're overwhelmed. And focusing has within it the possibility of regulating the intensity of any feeling that people have, right? So if people are feeling overwhelmed, we have ways of having them back up so that they can work with an issue. If people are so far from an issue that they're just closed off to it, we have ways of bringing it so it's more embodied, right? And how do we do that in focusing? Well, I'll tell you one of my favorite quotes from Eugene Gendlin. It will help explain the methods in focusing. He said, you don't have to stick your head in the soup in order to get a whiff of it, right? So we want to always be working at whiffing distance with every problem. If it's too close, it's sitting on our lap and it's kind of breathing down our neck. If it's too far, it's like it's locked away in some closet we never open. So we want to always find that right way of working. And focusing allows us to do that. Because if somebody comes in and they said, I'm really despairing about this issue, you might say back to them, something in you is despairing. Or if someone comes in and says, I'm so depressed, something in you is depressed, right? What's powerful about that? Well, I think two things. One is the word something is a placeholder, right? It holds that, and it brings our attention right there. It makes us more curious and helps us to go deeper. But the second reason it's important is that it's implied it's not all of you. And that very subtly makes people feel like Yeah, something in me is depressed. Yeah, that's right. It's not all of me, right? Focusing allows you to enter realms that you can't, that are inaccessible through the intellect alone, right? We're actually using a different pathway. Focusing is a non-analytic way of sensing into your body for what you know deep down inside. And your mind might not even know it yet, right? So Jenlin coined the word felt sense 50 years ago, and you've probably heard of it because it's become popular. But what he meant by it is people mean slightly different things by it. He means something you can feel in your body, but that isn't yet clear. It's vague, right? And we have a felt sense of everything. Where you chose to sit this morning, if you came early enough to have a choice, you got with your felt sense, right? So we're constantly using our felt sense. And let me give you an example. You have a phone call, let's say, with a sister who surprises you and says on the phone call, "You've never been there for me." And you get off the phone and you're feeling all tense. And, you know, I think when we feel upset like that, we have different ways of dealing with it. And we might want to just kind of say, well, I have to go to work. I can't deal with that, and put it aside. Or we might want to, we might ruminate about it all day. What is she talking about? I've helped her so much. But with focusing, we would go right to the place that we felt it. So we might just take 3 minutes to close our eyes and say, so that was, I didn't expect that this morning on the phone. What is that? And then we would just wait and we would say, you know, I feel, what I feel in my body? I feel contracted. I can feel a mixture of feeling angry. Is that it? And I'd sit with it for a while, say, yeah, I'm angry, but underneath I just feel hurt. Actually, I feel wounded. That was very wounding. And once we have that sort of beneath our usual responses, then we can decide how to work with it. You know, what does this wounded place in me need? You know, it might need me to write her a note. It might need to call her back. It might need to just self-soothe in some way. It might need to tell some friends. You can't believe what my sister said to me this morning, right? But we'll be in touch with what's most alive and most deep in us about it. So, and we didn't get there through the intellect. We got there through what our bodies knew. So focusing is a process of listening inwardly so you can hear the subtle messages your body is sending you while it's whispering before it has to shout at you, right? And that's really what focusing is. It's learning to listen to the subtle language that's inside of us that we often just put to the edge of awareness. And here we turn towards it very deliberately. The essence of focusing, as I've been telling you so far, is it's pausing, really pausing and having some silence. And then tuning into the freshly arising felt sense. But you can't just tune into it without an attitude of friendliness and compassion and kindness. Why is that? Why do we need to be friendly to ourselves? Well, otherwise, what's the story inside won't speak to us. We'll just shut down. You know, for instance, if you have a problem and you have two different friends call you up, right? And one of them is just the most compassionate friend, and you find yourself just crying or weeping or just pouring out your venting, telling your whole story, and it feels so good. The other friend is just a little judgmental and has kind of an attitude, and she might say to you, how's it going with that problem? And you'd say, fine, I'm dealing very well with it, thanks, right? Why is that? Because we feel the judgment and we don't want to share. We don't want to be vulnerable. Well, it's the same way with ourselves. If we treat ourselves with judgment, if I say I'm tired today, well, what do you expect? You didn't go to bed in time, right? I'm not going to want to hear from myself. So you have to say, oh, you poor dear, you're tired today. That must be hard, right? And then more will come. So again, that's one of the most challenging aspects, is to learn how to treat ourselves the way we would treat a good friend or a child that we loved. So the felt sense, I want to really define it a little more for you because it is a challenging concept, actually. It's the direct experience of the organism, of the system, and the way existence is experienced at the subverbal level before it's translated into words. So we have this palpable sense, but we don't yet have a word or an image for it, right? So that sounds kind of arcane, but it's actually something that's been around, even though Genlin coined the term 50 years ago. Ever since humans have been humans, we've had felt senses, right? So a felt sense, you have it all the time. Anytime someone asks you, how are you? And instead of saying fine, you actually say, well, let's see, how am I? Oh yeah, there's a little excitement poking through, but there's a little anxiety, right? It's much more complex than fine, right? If you leave the house in the morning and you have this nagging feeling you forgot something, but you don't know what it is, right? If you just go to your car or leave the house, you'll probably remember it an hour later. But if you stand right at the door and you say, what is it? And you're waiting, it's not using your intellect, you're waiting for something to come to you from what your body knows. And you might even try a few things. Did I feed the cat? Did I turn off the stove? And then you'll remember, oh yes, I wanted to bring a sweater because it's always so cold in the hotel, right? So when it comes, there's this whole body relief. And that's the case of focusing usually feels good. Even when we're focusing on something that's painful or shameful, it feels good to know it because we were carrying it anyway. The body knew it anyway, and now all of us knows it, right? Another example of a felt sense that you might have even at this conference or anytime you're walking down the street. Let's just say you see somebody you know, but you have no idea how you know them. They're so familiar, every cell in your body knows you know them, but you don't know, did I know them from the conference? Did I know them? Did I go to school, elementary school with them? You know, you just don't know. But what's interesting to me is before you have the name or the context, your body knows whether you want to greet them warmly or duck away, right? Our body has its own experience and its own memories. And so that's why it's so useful to be consulting with the body, because it often knows something we don't know in our mind. When we have an experience that's powerful, it's easy to get a felt sense. Sometimes a felt sense can be very subtle, but you know, you're walking along and suddenly you look up and there is a rainbow, right? We don't get that through our minds, we get it through our bodies. So I want you to have one more experience with it before we move on. And so I would like you now to think of something you love or feel very special towards. And let's not make it a person, because even when we love them, they're so complicated. So make it an activity you love to do, dancing or drawing or running or cooking or reading, or a place in nature that's very special to you, or even a pet that you love. So just find either a pet, a place, or an activity that brings you joy and that you can feel right now. Not one that you theoretically love, but one that you can actually feel your loving feelings for. So I'll give you a few minutes to find that. And just raise your hand when I know you have something to work with. Okay. Wonderful. So take a moment. You could describe to somebody why you love this, but we're going to do something a little different. Notice what it feels like to be you in the presence of this. Just notice that. You're just being with your positive feelings for this. And notice if there's a word or a phrase that would capture your feelings for this activity, this place in nature, or this pet. And then see if those words that came to you are really right. Or if they're better words, let these go and find better words for capturing what makes this so special for you, or so positive, or so loving. Then we're going to just go one step more. And if you don't do this step, it's fine too. But what is it about this activity or pet or place that gave me those words? See if you can go a little deeper and say, what is it about this pet or place or activity that gave me those words, that elicited those words? And then just wait and see what comes in your body. And when you're ready, come back into the room. So I chose, actually I didn't choose, it chose me, which was ballroom dancing. I love to dance. And what came was, what makes it special for me is, at first I said, I feel young. But actually, then I realized that wasn't quite right. The word was ageless. Right? And as there a difference to my body, the word ageless resonated and young didn't. And I feel freer and I feel sexier. So those were the words that came to me. And then when I asked, what is it about dancing that brings me those experiences, or those words came to me? And I realized that my whole life is very introverted and sedentary, with clients a lot of the day. And when I go into dancing, I'm stepping into an alternate universe, and I'm finding kind of a different self. And I hadn't put that together, that's the insight I got. It's just that it's so different from the rest of my life. Right? So I'm wondering if you would like to share what happened for you. So to summarize, the main aspects of focusing are, number one, the focusing attitude, treating ourselves with not just non-judgmental, but with friendliness, with warmth, with a sense of kindness, welcoming, receptive, curious. All of those qualities we try and cultivate in ourselves. And the second is bringing attention down into the body to a sensation you can feel, but that's related, it's meaningful. So it's not the belt that's too tight. It's the tightness you feel after a negative interaction with someone, right? So it's a sensation, but one that has meaning to it. Now, there are some sensations that can have meaning. At first, they're just sensations. So a client can come in with a headache. That's a sensation, right? But sometimes if we say, can you put the headache, what would it be like if it were in the center of your body? Because this is where we can feel things. And they might say, it feels kind of throbbing and constricted. And so then you just say that back. So the headache in here feels throbbing and constricted. And then often, because it's here, they can work with it. They can say, oh yeah, I know now what brought it on, or yeah, I know what I need to do for it, right? So we can turn a sensation into having meaning. Also with pain, if somebody comes in and they're in pain, pain is a physiological sensation. But it also has meaning to it, right? Usually when we're in pain, there's meaning around it, like, oh damn, it's back again. Or, will I ever get rid of this? So there could be some despair, there could be some anxiety, there could be some fear, or some self-blame. So we can't work maybe with the physiologic pain, but we can work with all the stuff that gets encrusted around pain with this focusing approach. But I want to tell you, because you may be sitting here thinking, well, this might work for some kind of clients, but not the ones I see. So I want to tell you about a fellow that came to me who couldn't have been less a candidate for therapy or for focusing even. So his name, I'll call him Rich. He had been diagnosed with MS. He was in his 30s. He was a smoker and he wasn't exercising, and his doctors had said to him, you better go see somebody because you've got to improve some of these behaviors. And he somehow ended up in my office. And at first I thought he should be with someone who was more like a coach or more behavioral, but he was there, so I thought, well, we'll see what we can do together. And he was an IT fellow, and so he was very much in his head, and he believed that everything could be solved with a spreadsheet or a program. So the first week, I just listened to him, and he was very identified with his symptoms. And he would come in, he actually had taken notes, and he would say things like, so Thursday was a good day, I was down to 7 cigarettes. Friday, there was a lot of stress at work, and I was up to a pack and a half. Right? So, he was very much tracking his behaviors, but he wasn't turning inward to see what was bringing these behaviors on. So I said about the second session when we had some rapport with each other, I said, Rich, I'm going to ask you to do something a little different. I'm going to ask to just have you have a little experience. And he said, okay, and he whipped out his pad and he said, I'll take it for homework. I like homework. I said, no, actually, let's do it right here, right now. So he looked suspicious, but I took him through a pretty lengthy relaxation, starting with his feet and his knees and his whole body till he got more relaxed, and then spent a good 3 minutes just breathing together with him. And then I said, I wonder if you could just take a moment and notice what it feels like to be you with MS 24/7. What's it like for you? And he waited, and then he just said, blurted out, it's goddamn relentless, that's what it is. And then he went on, I never know if I'm going to look like I'm walking like a drunk. I'm never going to know whether people at work are suspecting something because I don't want to tell anyone at work. And I don't know whether I'm going to end up in a wheelchair. It's just, I never break. It's relentless. So I reflected some of that back to him so he felt heard and validated. And then I said, so just, would you be willing to just go inside and close your eyes maybe for a minute and see what does this relentless feeling need? And I had no idea what he would say, of course. And I thought he might say, what are you talking about? But what he said was, I need to be touched. My girlfriend broke up with me about 4 months ago and I haven't been touched. And that helps, just to have somebody touch me. And then he said, there's a nurse who lives 2 streets down from me who's covered by my insurance and she does massage. I think I'm going to call her. So I said, okay, so this week, let's not work so much on the smoking and the exercise. Just go get a massage and see what happens. So he came back and he said, she has a package for 10 massages. I instantly signed up afterwards. He said, that was really great. And when she was stretching out my body at the end, she said, for MS patients, muscles get very contracted and tight. You might well do some yoga. And she said, there's somebody very close by to where you live that does a yoga class. He came back by and he said, that sounds a little woo-woo to me, he said. So I said, well, I think the woo-woo part happens more at the end. So maybe you could go and give yourself permission to just get up and leave whenever you feel like you've had enough, but just give it a try. He said, okay, I will. So he went to the yoga class, stayed for the whole time, because he had had permission to leave, so he didn't have to. And then he came back and he said, that was my favorite part, the end, when we just stretch out on the mat and get to relax. He said, that was the most relaxed I've been in a year. And then he said, but I noticed I kept coughing. And I thought, maybe if I just cut down on the smoking a little, I won't cough so much. So he very gradually, and it took him a year, very gradually cut down on his smoking until he stopped for a year later. And then he realized that the yoga place was just 1.5 miles from his house, and he thought, maybe I'll ride my bike there. And he started riding his bike. So I didn't even show you. This is the massage, and this is riding his bike. And pretty soon he thought, gee, I could ride on weekends. So his body knowing connected us to an authenticity the logical mind cannot hope to match. He couldn't plan his way to this, but just by listening to his body. So first it was just get a massage, then it was try the yoga, and then it was riding the bike, and eventually he got to his goal of reducing, increasing his exercise, reducing his smoking. The felt sense doesn't only carry a knowing of what's wrong, right? He got the handle relentless from connecting with his felt sense of what it's like to be with MS all the time.